A lot of people paying attention to what's happening with the Rent Guidelines Board. They will hold a public hearing in the Bronx this evening. It's the first in a series of public hearings this month before the final board vote on the highest proposed rent hikes in a decade.
Yeah, this was the scene at last month's meeting when elected officials stormed the stage. So the upcoming public hearings are expected to be packed and just as intense. So joining us this morning is Leah Goodridge, a tenant advocate and the managing attorney at Mobilization for Justice. So good morning, Leah. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me again.
Yes.
Yeah. Can we talk about the preliminary vote first and how many tenants exactly that this will affect?
Well, the preliminary vote affects 1 million rent-stabilized apartments and also rent regulated apartments, which also includes rent controlled. So that is at least 2 million New Yorkers.
Wow.
So, we always hear about these public hearings, and almost at the end of every kind of public hearing, it doesn't go in the way of what the public was saying at these hearings. Is this just a kind of standard operation of let's have the hearings even though we know what we're going to do?
No, so I was on the board for nearly 4 years as one of the tenant representatives, and I think that the public hearings create a measure of accountability because, see, if no one shows up and tells the board what they think, then they can just vote and have no consequences, and that's it. And so I think when hundreds of people show up and tell them this rent increase is too high, occasionally landlords will come and say, I need an increase to renovate my property or to repair it. That has an impact.
Talk about the timeline then. What happens now and when the vote takes place? When does the vote actually take place?
Yeah, the vote is going to be on June 21st at 7 p.m. at Cooper Union. And, what happens is we have the preliminary vote, and then now we're in the public hearing stage. So now we're in the stage where New Yorkers get to come and tell the board what they think of the preliminary vote, whether they should, pass it as high, whether it should be lower, and how it impacts their lives.
So if passed, these increases would be the highest in a decade. And even the mayor came out saying, you know what, this is just too high for what so many New Yorkers are facing right now. So does City Hall have any kind of impact on maybe saying, well, we're not going to follow through with what they actually voted on? Or is the vote the vote?
Well, how can I put this? I was on the board,
right.
And all of the appointees are appointed by the mayor,
right.
so the vote is a reflection of the mayor and the administration. I was a de Blasio appointee, and it really doesn't matter which mayor it is. They're just, it's supposed to be an independent board. I guess what I'm saying in a nice way is it's not an independent board.
So then help me understand, right? If the mayor's saying that it's too high,
yes.
the increases are too high, wouldn't the board say, well, he appointed us, so we're going to come on down now?
I think they're public statements, and then there's actually what happens. And so all of the appointees are by the mayor, and the appointees often let me just provide a little bit of insight.
Please.
There are 9 board members, and 2 of them are landlord representatives. 2 of them are tenant representatives. So I was one of the 2 tenant representatives, and then 5 of them are what's called public members. Those are in the middle. Those are the members that everyone's trying to sway on the board,
okay.
Both the landlords and tenants. So those are the ones that are most important. They're including the chair, and so those are very, very political positions because oftentimes they are voting in line with the administration. And so, if for example, the board wants to vote a high increase and sometimes there are calls, who knows? But public statements and then what actually happens, I would say, not to ramble a bit, but I would say what actually happens is a reflection of the administration.
Okay.
Well, let's talk. We were talking about, you were even mentioning, it doesn't really even matter what people say. But if you don't say anything, you can't complain about what actually happened. So we want to mention that between now and the vote, there will be a series of public hearings taking place. So we want to put up a full screen to tell you exactly where these meetings are taking place. Do we have that full screen? Yes? No?
No.
Well, tonight it's at the Bronx, in the Bronx at Hostos Community College. Thursday in Queens at the Jamaica Performing Arts Center, and then next Tuesday there will be a virtual meeting, and also next Thursday there will be one in Brooklyn at St. Francis College. So usually, how many people actually show up to
Hundreds.
these? Hundreds.
I mean, just to give an example, one year I was on, and this was pretty typical, there were 282 tenants who showed up to testify and 7 landlords who showed up to testify. And so oftentimes people, come and wait for quite a bit. But I just want to say, it's not like waiting at the doctor's office. You're waiting and you're hearing other New Yorkers talk about.
It's spirited.
Yeah, it's very
sure.
spirited. It's very spirited.
So,
and I'll just quickly add too, I think, like for example, a mayor being forced to make a comment, in large part that's also because people protested, right? And so things do have an impact.
Yeah, including city council members who were protesting on the stage as well. Can you explain to us what the rate was at? It was at 16-something%, right, at one point?
Yeah,
and then they came down.
Yes, there was a suggestion at one point in a report of 16%. And then the actual preliminary vote for this year is 2 to 5% for 1-year rent stabilized leases and 4 to 7% for 2-year rent stabilized leases. So that's still high. That's still a very high range for the last 10 years, but it's not 16%. And this is what tenant advocates were saying. Maybe the 16% putting it out there is a scare factor, because then when there is finally a vote, people go, oh, it's not as vote, but it's still a high number.
Yeah, but even when the vote is made, is there any legal action that tenants can take once it's done, or once it's done, it's done?
Unfortunately, once it's done, often it's done. It's done.
All right.
So.
Well, we'll see how all this plays out. I know you'll be following it very closely. We'll be talking to you between now and June 21st, right, when the final vote is. Leah, always great to have you here with your expertise and perspective.